Hey sinners, I'm Megan.
And I'm Lindsay, and this is Sinners Among Saints.
Hey, welcome back.
Hello.
Hope everyone had a good week.
Yeah, how was your week?
It's pretty good. Busy, super busy.
Yeah,
But
ours is pretty uneventful this week.
yeah, so is ours. Just busy, that's all. I feel like I never have a reprieve, but so is life.
Yes, agreed.
So yeah, not a whole lot of business, I think, to attend to.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so this week we are doing Ronnie Lee Gardner. So we'll just kind of jump in to his case, and it'll be a little probably less traumatizing than some of our last ones with, children and tons of rape and all sorts of craziness. So
That's good. So my case next week is a whole lot more of that. So everybody enjoy your reprieve
yeah,
this week.
I mean, there's still murder, and murder is murder, but there's less of all the kind of extra grotesque things.
Good.
So
I think we were due for one case
yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Okay, so Ronnie Lee Gardner was born January 16th, 1961, to Dan and Ruth Gardner. He was the youngest of 7 children, and he had a terrible childhood. Like, this is one of those cases that you look at and it's just, there was no chance. Like, just none. He had
We're
zero.
just gonna feel really bad for him.
Yeah, and I know, like, you shouldn't feel bad for, murderers or whatever, but there's a humanistic part of me that looks at their childhood and you're like, how do you expect anything good to come out of that? And I almost feel like I wish you could arrest their parents for being
sure.
such shitty people.
And we can always feel bad for what they went through in the past, but then try and separate what they do from that.
For sure. He, everyone has choices as an adult, but he has a terrible childhood. So his dad was a pretty bad alcoholic, couldn't keep a job, beat his wife and kids, the same old story. And his mom, from most accounts, she seemed like she was a pretty big partier. There were some sources that said she drank while pregnant. After she had her last child, so that would have been Ronnie, a doctor said that she asked to be sterilized because she said she couldn't handle any more kids.
Okay.
So she asked, but that they didn't.
Of course they didn't.
They did not.
Because we don't know what we really want.
Right. But yeah, so she, I think she knew she wasn't a great mom, but obviously she also did not.
And she had how many? He was her, what?
Seventh.
Seventh child.
Yeah, and she would go on to have 2 more kids later, so she ends up having 9 kids. Yeah, so at 2 years old, Ronnie would have his first dealing with police when he was found wandering the streets in only a diaper and undernourished.
Aww, at 2?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Right, and according to Dr. Craig Haney, who is a psychology professor and later testified at Gardner's commutation hearing, that the child welfare workers who responded to the case found Ronnie's home life so terrible that they filed a failure to care petition against Ruth, which was extremely rare for the time. And sorry.
A failure to care.
Yeah, and
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and the doctor said, or the professor just kept stressing, I can't stress how uncommon that was for the time. You have to think 1963, parenting was so much different then, and what they considered negligent care, was so different. And so there was just, in the article I read several times where he was like, you just don't know how rare that was. But in the end, she retained custody of Ronnie. He was given back to his mom. I don't even know if he was really taken away, but she continued
and just kind of looked into it a little bit.
Yeah, the social workers for sure felt like his home life was not okay. And so at this time, when he was 2, she was already remarried. So Dan, Ronnie's father, had left when he was about 18 months old because he had been having an affair and his girlfriend or mistress or whatever was pregnant. So Ronnie has a younger sister who's 6 months younger than him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he had left, but it did not take long for Ruth to find a new husband. So she married a convict named Bill Lucas. And this is so weird. So after they found Ronnie like wandering the streets, it says Ruth had taken to wearing her new husband Bill's belt around her neck as a warning to all of her kids.
What?
Yeah, and I was like,
I'm gonna beat your ass if you step out of line.
I'm guessing, because I had to read it like a few times, because at first I thought it was saying that like they put it around Ronnie's neck like a leash, and then I was like, wait, no, it says around her neck as a warning. And so that's all I could think of, was that now the essentially DCFS or whatever it was called back then has looked into their life and has determined that it's pretty shitty. So now she's gonna wear this belt around her neck, like. Don't tell anybody how terrible.
There's way too many of you, and if any of you say a word, you're getting beat.
Yeah, so weird. So then at age 4, Ronnie contracted meningitis, which left him hospitalized, and some later believe that it had caused organic brain damage, and they try to use that like in his trials as a reason as to why he was how he was. And it also said that he had developed a tic afterwards, possibly Tourette's.
Sad.
I know, really sad. And then by age 5, Ronnie says that he was sexually abused by, and I found this different in different articles, so either by an older sister or an older brother. But
what?
Either way, at age 5, he claims that he was being molested by an older sibling.
And do we know if the other siblings were being molested?
It didn't say.
Didn't say anything.
No.
That'd be super weird for a sister to molest.
Right? Yeah,
brother, but I mean, if she had been sexually abused.
Oh, for sure.
Totally not out of the question.
No. And then by age 6, his siblings had him huffing gas and glue.
At 6?
6.
Holy shit.
6.
Okay.
I will have a 6-year-old next week, and I cannot imagine him huffing gas.
No, I remember when my 6-year-olds, well, they're not 6 anymore, but when they were 6, would come to me and be like, do you like the smell of Sharpies?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Can you stop smelling Sharpies? Like, that's not something you should do.
It is not good for you.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, so, I mean, just by the age of 6, he's been wandering the streets, he's had meningitis, he's been sexually abused, now he's starting to use drugs, essentially. And then before the age of 10, he would be introduced to alcohol, LSD, and marijuana.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so a lot of the reports I read said basically by the time he was 10, he was an alcoholic and drug addict.
Oh, he really never had a chance.
No,
that's terrible.
No. So Ronnie stated throughout his childhood that he and his younger sister, Bonnie, who's the one that's 6 months younger than him, they would frequently run away, and that he would end up staying in these hobo camps, but eventually she would go home because she didn't like the people, like those type of people.
Well, it probably scared the shit out of her,
like
it should.
Yeah.
But he was just like,
yeah, he said
I'm away from my house.
Yeah, so. For sure. And he said he kind of fit in with those kind of people.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, and there was lots of reports that he was physically abused a lot as a kid from, I think, both parents. And at age 10, police had investigated a report that Ronnie had traded a BB gun for marijuana. And then he also, at age 10, him and his brother, Randy, were arrested for stealing cowboy boots. And they were taken to a juvenile detention center. And Dan, Ronnie and Randy's father, was called to come and pick them up. And when he arrived at the detention center, he took Randy home but left Ronnie there.
He got his older brother, but then he was like, you sit here.
Yeah. Yeah, and so...
That's sad.
Right? And so some reports state that when Ronnie recalled this incident that he was very, distraught. But in 1999, there was a deposition that Ronnie did, and he said that he was just unruly and his father was most likely just frustrated.
Well, that just probably made him feel, super unwanted
Well, and the other,
unloved,
yeah.
And after all the shit he's already been through at 10.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing was that Dan didn't think Ronnie was his. And he made sure to tell Ronnie that all the time.
Oh.
That he wasn't his child.
Oh, so that's why he was kind of treating him differently.
Yeah. He just, made it very known that he didn't.
Did we ever find out? Is it his dad?
No, I don't know.
Is he the father?
Is he? They did not do a Maury Povich show. Although I wish they would have. So all in all, so far, in Ronnie Lee Gardner's short 10 years, he's already been charged with public intox, shoplifting, petty larceny, grand larceny, gas sniffing. I don't know if that's really a charge or if he just got caught doing that, because I can't imagine them being like, what's the charge? Gas sniffing. But
sniff some fumes.
And violence against other students and his sister.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a long rap sheet.
Right? At 10.
At 10.
At 10 years old.
Ugh.
You're like in 4th grade.
Yeah.
So on
fourth or fifth.
Yeah. So on February 16th, 1972, at age 11, Gardner was admitted to the Utah State Hospital for evaluation as to why he was so difficult.
He was how old at this point?
11.
11.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's been put in the state hospital. The doctors at the state hospital found that his home life was so dysfunctional that they thought he would be better off living in a mental institution than living at home.
Which says a lot, because mental institutions in the 70s were like not a fun place to be.
No, not at all.
They treated their patients like
it was
terrible.
Yeah, terrifying.
And like science projects.
Yeah, oh yeah, awful. And so Dr. Craig Haney, the one that earlier had said how like crazy it was that his mom was charged, or they filed that petition against his mom, also stated that Ronnie's parents had pretty much just given up on him, that they put him in a mental hospital when he did not have a mental illness. Dr. Haney said it was a scary place with children who were psychotic. He said there was, children that were like, had super bizarre behavior, like really, really scary kind of mental illnesses. And there was Ronnie, who he believed did not have a mental illness. Which I don't think he necessarily had a mental illness of that extent, but there was definitely
something wrong.
Something going on. Like things, he had been killing brain cells by the time he was 6 years old.
Yeah.
Your brain is so immature still at that age, and then you add drugs and alcohol already to that. Yeah, it's just not a good thing. So the Dr. Haney had said that Ronnie was just super small and immature. And one of the doctors at the state hospital said that as a 5th grader, he had the bone structure of a 5-year-old.
What?
Yeah.
He was that small?
I guess so. And I could never, find anything that said, exact. Because as an adult, he's not, a tiny little person.
He's not?
No. He looks just very, regular and normal. But I don't know if it was because, they said when he was 2, he was undernourished. And then he started using drugs at, a young age. And there was also reports that pretty much his older sister raised everybody because his mom would leave for days at a time, partying and stuff. So I'm sure he just didn't...
Poor little kid,
I know,
man.
Yeah. It's just, there's just no hope. There really was just, you can't say that he could have turned out much better.
Yeah, it definitely plays a big role.
For sure. It's so sad. So Ronnie would go on to spend the next year at the state hospital. Psychological tests were ran and did show evidence of a possible brain impairment. And it said he scored a 47 on the Halstead-Rayton neuropsychological test battery. So that apparently, because I looked it up because I've never heard of that, apparently means moderate brain damage with possible implications on judgment. So I looked a little bit more into just that test because I was curious about it. And it said it's designed to evaluate the functioning of the brain and nervous system in individuals aged 15 and older. Now, mind you, he's 11, 12. So he's a little bit younger than what they usually use this for. But it said, although it originally was designed as a tool to detect brain damage, it is shown to be effective in identifying impairment associated with head trauma, tumors, cerebral vascular accidents, infections, degenerative diseases, learning disabilities, and specific neurological disorders. So
I feel like that's kind of weird, though, because if they're trying to do a test to check all of that,
Yeah.
And he's only 11, and they're giving him a test that's made for 15-year-olds. Like,
right.
Your brain function changes a whole lot in those 4 years.
Yeah. And he's definitely, I'm sure, immature for 11.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was interesting. So he was there for a year, and then once he was released from the hospital, he returned to his mother's home, where he immediately started to get into trouble. But Gardner did admit that he respected his stepfather and really liked him. He said he was really one of the only adult males who took interest in him, but instead of giving him guidance, he just introduced him to more criminal activity. Because, mind you, Mr. Lucas had been incarcerated in Wyoming in 1968.
Do we know what he was incarcerated for?
I'm thinking it's burglaries, because that seems to be his thing.
Okay.
So Lucas would use his stepchildren and his own children as lookouts during burglaries in homes from Parley's Canyon to Wyoming.
Okay.
Yeah. And Lucas also would steal mercury from gas meters to sell. Hello, 70s.
Yeah, what?
And he would bring it home, and then all of the kids would, play with it. And we all know now how toxic mercury is. So they would sit and play around with it back then. So
okay.
That's just another little, notch in his belt of brain damage kind of stuff. So,
okay.
Yeah. So teachers believed Gardner was hyperactive and needed remedial classes. He struggled to learn, and he felt that he wasn't as smart as the other kids. So he would get teased for being in these remedial classes and for being so small. So, of course, what did he do? Started to fight.
Oh, I can't even imagine. You're literally half the size of your classmates.
Yeah.
Of course he's going to get picked on.
Well, and you know how it was, even when we were in grade school, if kids had, super special needs, you didn't interact with them very much.
No,
and,
they just went to the special education classes.
Yeah, and, then... you knew that they were in these classes because they were taken out and, they were there in those classrooms. People, kids were just mean. I think, I think we're doing a better job. It's not perfect by any means, but we're doing definitely a better job these days at trying to be more inclusive of kids who are, special needs or are in those types of classes. But back then, it was absolutely not that way. And so he struggled from a very, very young age. By age 14, Gardner was placed in the Utah State Industrial School. And that was a juvenile reform school in Ogden that ran from October 1889 to 1983.
So this is a school that you went to, a boarding school kind of?
Yeah, and they're called reform schools. And I feel like my dad went to a reform school, but I was also listening to another podcast the other day, and they were talking about someone in their thing going to a reform school that's no longer open. So I think these were very primitive, kind of like juvenile detention centers, but they were schools.
Okay.
So he went to this, and it was the Utah State Industrial School. So I don't know exactly if they focused on giving them a trade, maybe.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Something like that, but it's no longer open. So, but the older boys there immediately began to pick on him, and a pecking order was established, and fighting earned respect. So that's just what he did. He fought to keep bullies at bay, and he fought if he felt threatened, and to earn respect, and pretty much whenever he didn't get what he wanted. So that was just kind of what he had learned, and that's how life was for him as a child. And he said it was a social system that made sense to him and that he was fully invested.
Okay. I mean, it kind of makes sense back then because everyone's the bullies aren't going to leave you alone until you stand up for yourself.
Yeah. Well, and, all the situations he's being put in or putting himself in is, those kinds of situations where, you have to fight to be the bigger or the better. So some could maybe say he had small man syndrome, all of that. But anyway, so while in reform school, and pretty much any time he was somewhere where he was told what to do, he would try to escape. So that's kind of his MO. He is the escapiest person.
Escapiest. He's a sneaky little thing.
He is. It definitely.
Literally, since he was 2 when he escaped and just wandering the streets.
It's his thing, throughout all of his years. So, he would jump fences, he would swim canals, anything he could do to flee from the school. And then he would hide out, at friends and family's house until the police would apprehend him and send him back. Gardner would state that any place where people didn't boss him around was fine, but as soon as rules came, then he was out. So, aside from any issues or amount of escapes Gardner had while in reform school, the staff actually found him to be very charming and bright.
Really?
Kind of, yeah, and it kind of follows him like this throughout, like, his years, even, like, when he's older and in prison, like, where he kind of gets this rapport with like, the guards or the staff. So he has this, like, he at least, like, has this charm about him.
Which is weird, because he obviously doesn't like authority.
Yeah.
Or to be told what to do.
But I think it's manipulative, too. Like, I think he uses it when he needs to. Yeah.
Okay.
So one staff named Stephen DeVries testified at one time that he wanted to open a fruit stand in Jackson, Wyoming, and had asked Gardner to manage it. Right.
I mean, I might question your life choices, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, and it said, and DeVries stated, I had enough trust and faith in him, but the plan fell through. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know, like, it's interesting, but I think it's a facade. Like, I think he puts on whatever he needs to, like, get what he wants.
Sure, that makes sense. Like, he's just manipulating the situation.
Yeah, for sure. But this guard really, and I think some people just are nicer humans and try to help out the less fortunate, and it doesn't always go great.
No.
So during some of his escapes, he would stay with his brother Randy, who was living with a man named Jack Stat.
Jack Stat?
Yeah, so kind of like Jack Sprat.
Yeah.
Only much, much worse. So apparently, Randy had met Jack at a bus stop where Jack had asked Randy to perform oral sex for $25.
What?
Yeah. Randy agreed and apparently decided to move in with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were they living, like, as a couple?
No.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
No. So, like I said,
gave good head, and he's like, "Hey,
yeah.
I need a roommate."
So, like I said, when Ronnie would escape, he would go stay with friends and family, including Randy. So then he had met Jack. So then Jack would visit Ronnie while he was at reform school. And once he was released from the industrial school, Jack offered Ronnie a place to live and even became his official foster parent for a few months. Even though when social workers
obviously a pedophile,
came to the house, they noted that there were lots of men hanging around that were dressed as women.
Oh, no.
So, not trying to, like...
Because, wait, he's how old at this point?
14.
And so that means Randy is still a minor, right?
Probably, but I don't know where he falls in the line of children.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to say, like, men who dress like women are, like, pedophiles and trying to do anything, but in this case, it for sure was. And there was even one source that I read that said Jack would dress as a woman and go into, like, the state office wherever you go to request foster children and pretend to be a woman to get boys to foster.
What?
Because he would have them work as prostitutes while he lived with them.
Oh, no.
So
wait, did he convince the foster people that he was a female?
Yeah. And apparently back then you had to have, like, 0
qualifications
and 0, like, identification. Like, I don't even know, because I feel like I've seen this throughout, like, different cases where, like, just shit was done back in, like, the 60s and 70s, and nobody, like, checked on it.
No. Nobody
asked to be like, is that who you really are? Like,
they were just like, I got some extra kids here.
Yeah.
Whoever wants them can have them.
Yeah.
You know that it just reminded me of something, like, when you see people who are giving away free kittens and they have to put on there, like, not for snake food. Like, you have all these free kids, like, please don't rape them, please don't murder them, but you can have them.
I have literally never seen...
You haven't seen that? Oh my gosh, it's all over. So people will be like, I have free kittens if anyone wants it, like, for a pet, not for snake food. Because literally...
That's like snakes'
free,
kitties.
I mean, it's free snake food, right? Because, you know, they'll just go pick up these little kittens for free, and they'll be like, oh, I'll take all of them, or I'll take 5 or 6 of them, and then they feed them to their snakes.
Okay, now I don't hate cats, but I don't like them because I cannot stand litter boxes. They're disgusting, so I don't want one in my house, but I think they're very cute, and I pet our neighborhood cats, and kittens are so adorable.
Yeah.
And I could not imagine feeding it to a snake.
No, I can't either. And
terrible.
I like snakes, too.
Yeah, I mean, snakes are fine. Yeah.
All day long, but...
That's crazy. But yeah, they pretty much needed a sign like that there because... That's apparently what they were doing. So, Ronnie and his brother lived with Jack, and they did work as prostitutes, and he also said that he was continuously sexually assaulted by Stat himself. This is where it gets like kind of, I don't even know. It's so weird, but like so sad and the same. So
this is just where it's gonna get sad?
Yeah.
It's this kid's life has been a nightmare up
It's
until this
awful.
point.
So in that 1999 deposition that I kind of referred to earlier, he tried to explain his relationship with Jack Stat by saying, I thought life like that was normal. At that time, I was still dumb enough not to even realize that it was a bad thing. Jack's kindness to Gardner caused him to endure the abuse and say that Jack was a good man and tried to help them out, but that he couldn't be helped. So like, Gardner's like defending him, like he was a great man, I just couldn't be helped.
And just putting all the blame on him.
Yeah, and then he also Gardner told psychologists that his time living with Stat was the most stable time of his life.
Oh my gosh, my heart just broke.
Right? Like, you're being prostituted out and sexually abused by another man on the regular, and that's the most stable time in your life.
Ew, I don't like this.
No, it's so insane. Like,
I had no clue.
No, and I didn't either. Like, I mean, you see, what he's done and everything, but they don't talk about this stuff in the trial, and, it's just awful. So sad. And he said that living with Jack was also one of the few times that somebody seemed to really care about him. I know.
That just
and he really
breaks my heart because his dad treated him like that. So this was probably like the first, he said he liked his stepdad, but who knows how much time they spent together.
Yeah.
And so then this was like another father figure that he trusted and was taking him in and taking care of him. And
he'd been molested apparently by like siblings. And so to him, like, that's just normal.
That's just how life is.
Yeah. Like, and he had no idea that was not okay. And that this guy was a pedophile.
That is sad.
So sad.
That is so sad.
Yeah. So eventually he left Stat's home and he bounced between living in the streets and going back and forth to reform school. Like, that's just kind of how his teenage years were. But one time while visiting his mother, he had met another teenager who lived in the same apartment complex named Deborah I think it's Bischoff or Biscoff, like the cookie. Bischoff, I'm not sure. And she said that he was very nice and she was drawn to his athletic build, red hair, and big smile. Now, during a phone interview later on, she would recall that her time with Ronnie was very different than what you would think. So she states that he was very caring, and she said, he never put me in the rough situations he was in throughout his life. He sheltered me from that stuff.
Aww.
So, all in all, he seemed like he, was really nice to her, was like a good boyfriend. Soon after meeting, she got pregnant, and in May 1977, she gave birth to their daughter. So Ronnie would have been 16 at this point.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's 16.
And having his first child.
Having his first kid.
Mm-hmm.
How old is she?
I didn't ever say, but I think she's around the same age.
Okay.
And it said, so by the time she had given birth to their daughter, he was already back in some sort of jail or whatever. Just that he was back in custody. So he missed the birth of their daughter. And then it says that, so they would live together when Ronnie wasn't in reform school or jail. So he would just bounce like back and forth. But despite all of that, Deborah remained committed to him for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And in 1979, after being set free, he and Deborah had planned for a second child. So in February of 1980, they gave birth to a son. And Ronnie was actually there for that birth.
Okay.
But that same month, at 19 years old, he was finally sentenced to his first stint at the Utah State Prison for robbery.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Deborah said it broke her heart because at that point, she really loved him. And I thought it was interesting that she said at that point, she really loved him. Maybe she didn't for a while. Like, by that time, I actually loved him, so it's super sad.
Well, to me, it sounds like maybe like after everything happened and shit went down, she fell out of love with him. But maybe at that point, she was still Still
okay, yeah. So on April 19th, 1981, Ronnie and a fellow inmate jumped the fence and escaped the minimum security unit at the prison. So I told you, he's an escapee person. Okay. He's a slippery little bugger. And so while he was in prison, Deborah had slept with another man, and she had told Ronnie. And so upon his escape, he went straight to Deborah, and she says they talked, and it was really emotional, and that she let Ronnie know how she felt, like when he'd went to prison, and she said it was the first time she'd ever seen him cry.
Aww.
So it was like,
so wait, did she know that he had escaped?
I don't think at that time.
He just showed up at her house and was like,
I don't know how much
hey.
I don't know how much news coverage that kind of stuff had back then, but it just, she just said that eventually he got there and they had a discussion.
Okay.
So Ronnie would spend the next few days with Deborah and their children, making it the last time he would actually spend time with any of them outside of prison.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know. But then, so on April 30th, 1981, so this was a couple weeks after he'd escaped, not even that, a week and a half, he heads to his sister-in-law's home to confront the man that Deborah had slept with. Now, I don't know who this guy was or, why he's chilling at, apparently Deborah's sister's house.
Yeah.
I don't know who he was. I could never figure that out, but there was more than one account that said he went to his sister-in-law's house to confront this guy. And Gardner ended up stabbing him before getting shot in the neck. So
wait, who got shot in the neck?
Ronnie did. So he went to the house to confront the guy, stabbed the guy that had been sleeping with Deborah, and then that guy shot him in the neck.
Dude, the first rule is don't bring a knife to a
gunfight, right? Yeah, come on. You didn't think that there was going to be some, more firepower than just a knife. So police arrested Gardner as he tried to flee the scene, and he earned more time for the escape and then other crimes that were committed while on the lam. And I don't know what the other crimes were, or if it was just that, attacking a dude and stabbing him. It didn't really say, but it just said he was charged with other crimes.
But the guy lived.
Yeah, he lived. Yeah, he lived.
Okay.
So it would be three more years before Gardner would see the outside of the prison, but not without trying. So in December 1981, he ran from the visiting room, where he would later sit for a commutation hearing, and he successfully scaled one of the razor-topped fences before an officer shot him with a shotgun and took him back into custody.
Holy shit!
And I think it was just a beanbag gun because they don't talk about any injuries. But yeah, he was able to run out of the visiting room and jump a fence before they shot him.
Okay.
Drag him back in. I mean, you cannot blame the dude for trying.
No, but that wasn't a great escape plan, because, no. You're in the visitation room, so there's obviously guards right there.
Yeah.
And it's middle of the day, and you just...
As you'll see, most of his, attempts and stuff, I don't think they're super well thought out.
Well, because he's not the smartest guy.
No, right? And I think he thinks about, that he wants to do it, but there's not a lot put into,
it just
how exactly. Yes.
All right, I'm going to wait until I see a moment, and then I'm just going to book it.
Yeah. So, let's see. So, once in 1984, they attempted to move him from his cell, and he attacked the guards with a screwdriver.
Where did he get a screwdriver?
I don't know. He manages to get a lot of things in prison, and I don't know if this is just the 70s or 80s, they're just not up on their shit, but yeah, so he had a screwdriver somehow. Okay. And stabbed them. He was also the ringleader in a prison riot where he headbutted an officer and was subdued with a stun gun, and they essentially barricaded themselves in an area of the prison and lit stuff on fire. So full on prison. I don't know what they thought was going to happen from that. Probably just to do it. And
well, because usually then they have to clear the prison out.
Yeah, and I don't know if he thought maybe he could escape fire, that way,
right?
But
and then
yeah,
that way they're distracted by the fire and they just run for it, man.
Yeah. So people would say that his violent temper would sharply contrast his pleasant demeanor, and some said that he would only turn on the charm to get what he wanted. He would chat with the guards, he knew their names, and he would ask them about their lives.
Yeah, like, this has to be manipulative. He literally tried to stab one of them with a screwdriver.
Yeah, and he headbutted another one.
And
And they had to, like, subdue him with a stun gun.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's definitely, like, he just, you know, he puts on the charm, he, like, gets talking to these guys and, like, knows their names and their families.
Yeah.
To try and, like, use it. So he tried one more time to escape, but that was a failure, and it didn't say exactly what happened. That's kind of sad, because, like, I kind of like the stories of what he does. But on August 6, 1984, Ronnie Lee Gardner would fake an illness, and they would take him to the university hospital, and he would attack the guard and escape. So Don Levitt was the transportation officer that had taken him to the university hospital, and Gardner had punched him so hard in the face, it broke his eye socket and his nose in 16 places.
What?
I didn't
even know that was possible.
Me either. Like, I was having a discussion last night with Cody, because I was like, how, like, is your nose even big enough for, like, 16 places to be, like, broke? He just...
I mean, that was the eye socket and the nose, right?
From what it sounded like was that, like, he broke his eye socket and then broke his nose in 16 places. Right? I can't even, like, that's a really hard punch.
That is a really hard punch.
Like, a really hard punch.
Oh.
And so what had happened, so the doctor had come in to check on Ronnie. In one account I read that he had, like, somehow made himself throw up, and so that's why they took him to the hospital. And I don't know why they didn't have, like, nurses at that prison. I don't know what made it where they had to drive him all the way to the university hospital, because that seemed weird. But anyway, so the doctor had come in, he had left, then Ronnie punched this guard in the face and told him that if he didn't, like, if the doctor had come back in, if he told, sorry, blah, 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 blah.
Talking is hard.
It's really hard, my brain. He said if he didn't unshackle him before the doctor came in, that he would have to kill both of them. So the guard was super dazed and kind of out of it, but unshackled him, because he
was like, okay.
Yeah, because he didn't want him to kill him and the doctor, apparently.
But how's he going to kill him when he's shackled?
Well, he just punched him enough to break his nose in 16 places.
Ugh.
I don't know.
I would have just shackled his wrists.
Right? Yeah.
Some more shackles on. Don't remove any.
He eventually took the guard's gun, ran out of the hospital, and in the parking lot ran into a poor medical student named Mike Lynch. And he pointed the gun at his back and ordered him to give him a ride. And Lynch said that Gardner told him, "I don't want to kill you, but I have nothing to lose."
Oh my gosh.
And so he ended up stealing Lynch's clothes and his motorcycle. He tied Lynch up with his own shoelaces.
Oh, sad.
And stole all of his stuff and ended up being on the run for 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah. On August 11th, a mailman had found Levitt's firearm, wallet, and a note from Gardner just in a random mailbox.
Okay, just as a side note, I just looked this up because I wanted to see. There's a Dr. Michael Lynch in oncology that still works in Salt Lake. I want to know if this was when he was a med student. So, Dr. Lynch, if you're out there and this was you, let us know.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to hear, like, your account on it. But anyway, so this mailman found the firearm, the wallet, and a note from Gardner in a mailbox that said, "Here's the gun and wallet taken from the guard at the hospital. I don't want to hurt no one else. I just want to be free."
Aww.
It's like, sometimes you, like, kind of feel bad for him, because, like, you think...
I feel bad for him a lot, actually.
I know, and
I don't want to, but I kind of do.
But you do, because it's like, he just doesn't want to be in jail or prison, but he's not good at not being in jail and prison.
Well, like, because he's lived his whole life in it, right? He's like basically institutionalized at this point.
Absolutely. But he doesn't, you know, some people get institutionalized and they kind of prefer to be there, you know, and they, like, release him and they're like, no, I kind of would rather stay there. But he's definitely not that way. He just doesn't want to be locked up. He wants to be free. So it's like kind of sad. So so we're going to get into now his first murder. So on October 9th in 1984, this is still while he's on the run.
Okay.
Was high on cocaine, and he went into the Cheers Tavern in downtown Salt Lake with Darcy Perry McCoy, and she was a sister of a cousin's wife. And she claims they were intent on robbing the place, like, from the start.
Okay.
Ronnie has a different story as to why they went there. So when they went there, The bartender was 37-year-old Melvin Otterstrom. He was part of the 19th Special Forces Group in the Utah National Guard. He worked as a comptroller for the Utah Paperbox Company. He was a father and a husband. And he was working one night a week at Cheers to earn extra money to help a relative.
And where everybody knows your name.
Yes. And the Cheers Tavern, I don't know if it's still around, but it did have the same logo as the Cheers TV show.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah.
He was just working one day a week
One night a week
to earn a little extra money.
To help a relative.
He's just this stand-up guy.
Yeah, super nice guy. So Gardner would tell the Board of Pardons that he was there to collect money for a friend when he and Otterstrom began to argue. And then Gardner said that Otterstrom closed the bar so the two could fight. And that Gardner said that it was at that time that he decided to rob the bar. Right? So he's there for money. They get in an argument, according to him. The bartender closes the bar so they can fight, and then he's like, you know what, I think I'm going to rob this place too, while this is happening.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
No. And then he said that during the struggle, of course, the gun went off in Otterstrom's face.
Mm-hmm, of course.
Yeah. So the medical examiner and the responding officers say that there was no sign of a struggle, and they believe Otterstrom was shot in the face while lying on his back. Yeah. And they said that he was like a big kind of guy and he was special forces. Yeah. And they were like, there's no way that he had gotten in a struggle with him and there was like no signs of struggle.
Yeah.
Because they.
And probably he couldn't have overpowered him.
No. And one of the detectives said that to him it looked like it was an execution.
Like he probably was being cooperative.
Yeah, and he went in there with the intent to rob
so that they could rob him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then this asshole just shot him anyways.
And do I know how much money he got?
No.
Less than $100.
No.
Less than $100.
That is so terrible. Like somebody lost their life for less than $100. Not that any amount of money makes it okay, but really?
No, like less than $100.
Oh, that sucks.
I mean, I don't know how you do it, like, when you go in to rob a place, but I feel like I would want to ask, like, how much they had first and be like, is
this going to be worth it?
That's just not going to do it, so I'll just peace out. Because if I'm going to go to, like, prison for some shit, like, it's not going to be for less than $100.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be, like, some big thing where I, like, try to run to the Bahamas or something, and then they catch me and bring me back. But that's neither here nor there. That's just my vision board. So 3 weeks later, Gardner was arrested at a cousin's home off of a tip that police had got from someone somewhere. I don't know what it was, but so before being arrested, get this. Okay, so before being arrested, Gardner attended Otterstrom's funeral and pretended to be a childhood friend.
Shut up.
He went to the man that he murdered's funeral and talked to family members and said he was a childhood friend.
What a dickhead.
Right? So then you, like, hear something like that and you're like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, all of the, like, compassion I just felt for you was out the window.
Yeah, like, what in the hell? Like, how do you even do that?
That's like serial killer level shit.
It's insane.
Like you liked it so much that you wanted to go see all of the damage you had caused.
Well, and usually, like, in those cases, when it is like a crazy serial killer, they'll go, but they don't make themselves known and talk to the family like, hey, I was this BFF. Just here, so sad.
Yeah, let me tell you some stories about our friendship.
So weird.
What an ass.
Yeah. He ended up being charged with first-degree murder and other, obviously, escape-related felonies. And knowing that he'd most likely never get out of prison now, he felt he only had two options. And for him, it was escape or suicide. And I'm sure we can guess which one he went for. So at this time... Escape. At this point, he was being held on $1.5 million bail while awaiting trial, which was...
Damn.
A lot of money for the... 1984. Yeah. It's a lot of money. All right, here's the big culmination of well, not the culmination of his life because there's some more shit, but this is a big one. So, on April 2nd, 1985, two guards were escorting Gardner to a hearing at the Salt Lake City Metropolitan Hall of Justice, which is no longer there. The courthouse that's there now is a newer one. And so some stories vary, and it was almost like equal between what I read. So some of them said that a woman slipped him a gun in the parking garage as he was being escorted in. Now, don't ask me what, like, were they just like, okay, you head in there, go up the stairs and to the left, and we'll be up there in a minute. Like, I don't understand, like, how that was possible. But other accounts also said that they believe he got a gun that was taped under a drinking fountain. Now, I do know, like, in this, the Hall of Justice, back then, it was, like, anybody could get into the same place where the inmates were. It was very, like, open. It wasn't like, you know, when you go to court now, like, you walk in the front doors and you go through the metal detectors and, like, you know, there's only certain places that you can go if you're not, like, you know, if you're coming in for, like, hearings, you're in a different place than everyone else. Like, you don't just have access. But back then it seemed like this was just like a free-for-all. Everyone went everywhere and it wasn't a big deal, which is super crazy. And they ended up changing it after this whole debacle. So after getting into the courthouse, whether or not he was slipped the gun in the parking garage or if he got it off a drinking fountain in the courthouse, Gardner ended up pointing the gun at the guards and was immediately shot in the upper right chest. So one account I read said one of the guards just, like, when he pointed the gun, like, peaced out and, like, ran out of the building.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if that's true at all.
I hope.
But I do too. But it said the other one, the other guard that was there just immediately, like, shot him. So got him in the upper right chest. Gardner ducked into a records room, yelling, "They hit me, they got me, I've been hit bad." And in the records room, there were two attorneys. So there was Bob Macri and Michael Burdell. Michael Burdell was in there doing pro bono work for his church. And I know. And Bob Macri would later testify that Gardner first pointed the gun at him, but then turned it on Burdell and fired, shooting him directly in the right eye. Yeah. And Burdell said that, or not Burdell, sorry. Macri said that Burdell just yelled, "Oh my God," and then collapsed to the floor.
Oh.
Yeah. So Macri ran out of the records room. When he ran out of the records room, he just started screaming, like, "Police, help, murder." And so then Gardner ran from the records room, ran right into an unarmed bailiff, 58-year-old Nicholas Kirk, who had just stepped out of the elevator because he heard about the shooting and he was running down to protect the judge.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And so unarmed bailiff, like, what good does that do in these situations?
Yeah.
Like, so
nothing.
Frustrating. And Gardner shot him in the stomach, sending him to the floor. Gardner stepped over him, headed down the stairwell to the second floor. Once down there was a man filling a vending machine. Gardner demanded a ride from him and, like, held him at gunpoint, demanded a ride from him. So as they were navigating the hallways leading to the doors, there was an open window and the vending machine dude jumped out the window.
He's like, "Screw this, I'm not taking you anywhere."
Thankfully, they were only on, like, the second floor.
I was going to say, please tell me he lived.
Yeah, I don't have any idea. Like, they don't say anything else about this poor, like, vending machine man. But all I know is that it said that Gardner did ask him for some candy and then demanded a ride.
What?
And he was, like, all bloody, you know, because he'd been shot in the chest. Yeah, and this poor guy, like, saw an open window and just peaced out. He was like,
oh my gosh.
Right? Now there's Gardner. He was bloody, alone, and he only had one bullet left. And so upon...
No candy.
No candy. Nope. The guy took that with him. He was like, "Give me that." So as he exited the courthouse, he was surrounded by dozens of officers with guns. He dropped his gun and yelled, "Don't shoot, I don't have a gun." And he went in. Like, they were able to take him into custody without any further incident.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And I'll post when I post the pictures for this, too, because there are pictures of him, like, outside of the courthouse, and he's just all bloody, like, on the one side of his chest.
Well, and I feel like every picture that I see of this guy, he's got, like, this shit-eating grin on his face.
Well, and it's so weird because at the end, he's, like, completely bald.
Yeah.
But when he's young, he has, like, this curly hair and, like, total 70s, like, stash. It's pretty awesome. It's super awesome. But yeah, he does, like, he seems to be smiling a lot. And they even said, like, in the trial that he was, like, in pretty good spirits throughout the trial.
Like, literally, I feel like every picture I've ever seen of him, he's just got this, like, grin on his face.
Yeah.
It's disturbing.
Yeah, I don't think he's all there. I really don't.
No.
Now, mind you, so they take him into custody without incident, and all of this has happened, and he is 24.
You, like, oh my mind is just blown, because I keep thinking that, like, so much has happened to this point that he's got to be older.
Right. That's how I felt.
24.
Yeah, that's how I felt. When I saw that, I was like, 24, and I was like, oh, I guess 1985, like that would be 24.
Wow.
But I was blown away because just so much has happened in his life.
24.
So 24.
Just think what you had done with your life at 24.
Yeah.
Damn.
I didn't even have kids yet.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah. Gardner was taken to the university hospital where he was listed in serious condition, but obviously recovered because they always do. The unarmed bailiff, Nicholas Kirk, was listed in critical condition at LDS hospital, but he survived surgery. And then Michael Burdell, the attorney, was taken to the Holy Cross Hospital where he died in surgery 45 minutes later.
Oh, he lived that long after getting shot in the eye?
Yeah.
Oh, that poor man.
I know.
Just doing pro bono work for his church.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh.
So sad. So during a search of the courthouse, police did find a bag of men's clothing under a sink in the women's bathroom. Darcy McCoy was also found unarmed about a mile away, like waiting in a car. And she was arrested.
No, wait, who? She was the cousin, right?
She was
cousin's sister.
cousin's wife's sister? Okay. That was with him when he killed Otterstrom.
Okay.
So, and she ended up testifying in that case against him.
Oh.
So she like, once he was caught for that, she testified against him in that one. And then, so her sister, so she was arrested when she was found like a mile away. And then her sister, Karma Jolly Hainsworth, she ended up being sentenced to 8 years in prison for delivering the clothes and messages to Ronnie in preparation for the escape.
Oh.
And she would later say that she had no idea, like, what was going to happen. Like, she just knew that he was going to escape, but she didn't know what was really supposed to happen that day. So she just said that she was taking clothes there, and she had taken messages back and forth between Darcy and him.
Like past notes?
Apparently, and I don't know.
Because I feel like if you would take a message and, like, say it, then you would know what was going to happen, right?
Right, but I think it was, like, paper messages, and I don't know how, like, all of that worked.
All that goes into the prison,
no.
too. Like,
yeah.
What?
And she got 8 years, and Darcy never ends up spending any jail time, even though they believe that she had something to do more with the escape attempt.
Well, she was probably like, hey, I'll testify.
Yeah, well, and
don't charge me.
So they could never prove the identity of the person who gave him the gun, and the only thing they ever got out was not provided until 2010 when Ronnie said that the person who gave him the gun was the woman who testified against me in the Cheers murder.
And that was her.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was some accounts I read that said that her and her sister looked extremely similar, and so that was why they couldn't ever charge her with anything, because the only eyewitnesses could only identify Karma as being there.
Oh.
But some people said they looked so much alike that
it could have been
that people saw either one of them.
Okay.
So so Darcy never actually got any jail time for any of that. Now, a Board of Pardons member named Don Blanchard asked Gardner if he felt threatened by any of his victims, and he said, "I didn't have to kill anybody. No one done anything to deserve what happened." We'll just leave that grammar.
Yep. I can't even.
There's a few of these that I was reading from.
So many double negatives.
Yeah. It hurts my brain, but I wrote it down exactly as he done said it. So, so in June 1985, Ronnie Lee Gardner pleaded guilty to Otterstrom's murder and received a sentence of life without parole. Now, while awaiting trial for the murder of Michael Burdell, he ends up being diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. And so I looked it up a little bit more because I feel like everyone's like, oh, they're antisocial, or, and I just you never know. So I looked it up just to get a more definite answer of what it is. So it says that antisocial personality disorder is characterized by long-term patterns of disregard of or violation of the rights of others, as well as difficulty in sustaining long-term relationships, a lack of empathy, as well as a history of rule breaking, a tendency towards substance abuse, and impulsive and aggressive behavior. Onset often happens before the age of 8, and in 80% of antisocial personality disorder cases, first symptoms occur by age 11.
Okay, so he kind of fits that.
Yeah, and it said that it usually peaks in people aged 24 to 44, and then often decreases in people aged 45 to 65, which I thought was interesting. You peak, and then eventually you aren't as antisocial personality disorder. Like, it was just interesting to me that, like, there was a peak and then, like, a time when, like, it kind of diminished.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, and it said the percent of people in, like, your just general population that have antisocial personality disorder is 0.5 to 3.5%.
Oh, so that's super rare.
Yeah, so not very common. But it said in one study of 320 newly incarcerated individuals that over 35% of them had antisocial personality disorder.
Dang.
Yeah, so with it being such, like, a rare thing in the general population, to see how many incarcerated individuals had it was really interesting.
They all get in trouble.
Yeah, it was super interesting.
Okay.
During his trial for the murder of Michael Burdell, Gardner threatened to disrupt court because they made him wear a leg brace that would lock if he tried to run away. And I found that super hilarious. And the guards pretty much told him that it would behoove him to act appropriate in front of the jurors.
All I can do is picture Forrest Gump with his braces, right? And then he starts running and they all, like, break.
Lock. I just love, like, it's just gonna, like, lock him. What is he gonna, like, drag his leg behind him? Like, yeah. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, man, that's amazing. Like, they didn't even
do that for everybody.
Right, well, they don't even just shackle his feet together.
Yeah,
like, they had some...
Why don't we do this more often?
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
Oh, I do too. And I just think it's hilarious that he was like, I'm gonna, like, disrupt court. He's like a child. Like, he really is. Like, I'm gonna throw a fit if you don't, if you make me do this. And they're like, okay, well then... Like,
throw your tantrum.
Yeah. You're on trial for murder. Like, that's not gonna be good for you. On October 22nd... 1985, jurors deliberated for less than 3 hours and found Gardner guilty of capital murder. And then just 3 days later, on October 25th, they sentenced him to death by fire, and he picked firing squad.
Okay.
So that's what he's kind of known for, is being, I think he's the last person that's been executed by firing squad in Utah. Because they got rid of the firing squad, I want to say, in 2004 or 2006. Right around there. They no longer do it. There was just in the last 14 years, by the time he'd been executed, there was Gary Gilmore was executed by firing squad, and then one other guy, and I can't remember his name now, but there was one other guy that was like a child murderer that was executed by firing squad. Ronnie Lee Gardner would spend the next 25 years on death row, being the then youngest inmate on death row. And his next 25 years in prison were far from uneventful.
Oh, of course. Because
now he, like, really has nothing to lose, right? Because
he's like, I'm gonna die
he's sentenced to death. So what worse can you do to me? So in October 1987, he would break the glass partition between him and a woman he was visiting with, the other inmates in the room, barricaded the doors, and cheered him on while they had sex.
Wait, consensually?
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ew.
And then he tried to say afterwards that breaking the glass partition was an accident.
Okay. Do we know who this woman was?
No, it never said who it was.
Just some random lady comes to have a conjugal visit that's not approved,
that's not
obviously.
That's not a conjugal visit.
Wow.
Yeah, and the other inmates barricaded the doors and then
cheered him on.
How awkward.
Ew.
As the woman, I would feel so weird.
Right? Like, ew.
So gross and weird, and, like, I just can't even.
No.
Like, no. So weird.
That is not what I was expecting to hear. Okay.
No, and I love how it was an accident.
Yeah, it just broke.
Okay, Harry Potter. You didn't just, like...
You didn't just make it disappear.
By the way, Hagrid died. Did you see that?
No.
He died today.
Okay.
I know.
Thanks for ruining my night.
Sorry. I really loved him.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. Yeah, and they said there was no cause of death. He was 72, though.
He was?
Yeah, I didn't realize he was that old.
I didn't realize he was that old either.
No, but
not that that's even that old.
Actually, no, but, like, I just assumed... I don't know why. I just assumed he was, like, in his 50s or something. I didn't realize he was 72, but yeah, his agent didn't release like a
Oh no.
I know, so sad. Anyway, sorry, side note, it was very sad. Okay, so then in August of 1990, he decides to change his method of execution to lethal injection. And I don't really know, like, if you can just do that before your like date, if you like just like, I don't want to, but he changed it. And then obviously at that time his execution was averted anyway because it was pending appeals. So then in July 1991, a state judge ruled that Gardner had ineffective counsel at his sentencing. And so in September of 1994, Gardner gets drunk off some good old prison hooch that he'd been making in his toilet.
The toilet wine.
And he stabs a fellow inmate named Richard Fats Thomas. And I feel like it's like such a mob name, and I don't think he's a mob person, but every time I read it, I'm like just picturing some like just old white like Jersey, like it's a great name. But he stabs Richard Fats Thomas with
I'm referring to him as Dickie Fats.
Dickie Fats.
That better.
I do too. So he stabbed him with a shank that he made from some metal sunglasses.
What?
I don't know why he has metal sunglasses. I don't know.
What?
I told you, he like
None of this makes sense.
He is always getting things. I don't know how.
Okay.
Yeah. And he said that he had done something that Thomas had found, that Dickie Fats had found disrespectful. Then he he made a threat to him, so then he stabbed him.
Okay, and isn't it how it works when you're on death row that you're like in your cell? I mean, you get like guard time, but I thought that was all separate from Gen Pop.
Right, and from what I read too, like as a death row inmate, but it did so, and I don't know how it really works, but it did say that he did have some harsher punishments because most death row inmates would get 3 hours of like recreation time, where him and one other guy would only get 1 hour of recreation time. Okay. But I don't know where they had recreation time. I don't know why and how he was like able to be around other people.
Yeah, because
I thought death row.
I don't know how it works, but I always thought that they were like secluded on the row.
Yeah,
not away, not by Gen Pop, and then they just got to go out and do their yard time by themselves. Yeah,
that's what I thought too, but I don't know. So he ended up stabbing him in the neck, chest, back, and arms, and Thomas did survive. But Gardner was charged with another capital crime under a 1974 Utah law reserved for prison attacks by first-degree felony inmates.
Okay.
In 1996, Gardner threatens to sue the state because now he wants to be executed by firing squad again.
Okay. He just can't make up his mind.
But he said that the reason that he had changed it in the beginning was for his children. I think they wanted him to do lethal injection.
Okay.
But he said now that they were older, he wanted firing squad.
Okay.
And it was interesting because I did see like a video where his daughter was talking like on the day of execution, and she said that her father wanted to be executed by firing squad because he had shot people and he believes in an eye for an eye. But then I also read that he wanted to be executed by firing squad. It's something to do with the Mormon religion and to like show his faith to them. I don't really know. And I was like, okay, I don't know which one is true, but
okay.
So in 1997, the Utah Supreme Court determined Gardner could not be charged with another capital crime because no one died. So then they didn't charge him with a capital crime.
Okay.
So at this point, his execution is continued once again because he's in another appeal process. But in August, which I find this to be kind of funny. So in August of 2003, a federal magistrate recommends dismissing all of Gardner's appeals. And a federal judge agreed.
What?
Yeah, they pretty much just got to a point where they're like, no.
You don't get any more appeals.
No, we're not like saying any more of this. So in April 2004, the Utah Supreme Court denies Gardner's request for a new trial. And in March 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court declines to hear Gardner's appeals. And on April 23, 2010, a state judge schedules Gardner's execution for June 18th, 2010. And I had read somewhere, too, that, like...
So everyone was just, like, done with this shit, and they were like, you don't get the rest of your appeals. Like, you can only appeal so many times, right? You have Like, everyone on death row has so many
Yeah, and I think,
attempts, and then...
Well, and he didn't have a scheduled date, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he didn't have anything like that, so
well,
I don't know
once you've exhausted all of your pills, that's it, but...
Right.
I've never heard them saying, like, you don't get your pills anymore. Sorry.
Yeah, it was super interesting. But it's like they'd had enough of him.
Okay.
So now here's something that I found, like, super interesting. So weirdly enough, that Bob Macri that was in the office, he started visiting Gardner in prison.
What?
And he says that he taught Gardner grammar, yoga, and about King Arthur and chivalry.
I'm sorry, what?
I mean, the grammar and the yoga probably needed. Like, he needed the grammar lesson, he needed some, like, lessons on how to, like, find his zen. But King Arthur? Like, what?
And how to be chivalrous in
chivalry.
prison?
Like, I don't know.
What?
The weirdest thing. It was so weird.
That is bizarre.
But yeah, he, like, I guess at one point, like, Gardner wanted to do a garden. He wanted to do, like, kind of like a place for kids with troubled youths and stuff come and work, and he wanted to do that. You know, he wanted to I don't know.
But, like, what possessed this guy to just go start visiting him and being like, oh, I'm gonna teach you some shit before you die?
I don't know.
Like, I watched you murder somebody.
And he testified against him. He testified against him as well.
There are so many good people out there.
Yeah.
I would know. Nope.
Yeah. It was super interesting. So now I'm going to get kind of into, like, his time up before his execution. So I always like to look at the last meal, and I don't know why, but I always find them, like, interesting. So
yeah, me too.
His last meal consisted of steak, lobster tail, apple pie, vanilla ice cream, and 7-Up.
Oh, that might be my last meal, actually, with
right?
the Diet Coke.
I mean, I don't like lobster, but the rest of it...
I love lobster tail. I love steak.
The rest of it I could be down with.
Vanilla ice cream. Yeah. But, like, that sounds delicious, actually.
Yeah. And then after that, he began a 48-hour fast and watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy and read Divine Justice, which I guess is like a spy novel.
Okay.
Yeah. And so now I'm going to read this. I kind of found, like, an article that talked about, like, his execution and kind of, like, what people witnessed. So I'm just going to kind of read it to you because I thought it was kind of interesting. So it said, Gardner's final procession toward his execution began earlier in the week. He was moved at 9 p.m. Wednesday from his 6 by 12-foot cell on death row to a death watch cell near the execution chamber. Prison guards monitored him around the clock. At exactly midnight Friday, which was his execution day, the inmate, who spent more than half his life behind bars, was awakened from a nap for his execution. He was escorted to the nearby execution chamber, where he was strapped to a metallic winged chair. He wore a dark prison jumpsuit and no shoes. The chair was raised on a small black platform like a stage. Relatives of his victims and members of the media witnessed the execution in separate rooms nearby. When a prison official opened a curtain to reveal the death chamber to witnesses early Friday, convicted killer Ronnie Lee Gardner was already strapped to the execution chair. His eyes darted around the room, but he appeared calm, even at peace, witnesses said. This was a stark contrast from a troubled life marred by drugs, sexual abuse, and indiscriminate violence. Asked by a prison official if he wanted to say anything, Gardner responded simply, "I do not. No." A black hood was then slipped over his bald head. A small circular target attached over his heart. Gardner repeatedly rubbed his left thumb and forefinger moments before the shooting. A team of 5 anonymous marksmen, armed with .30 caliber Winchester rifles, standing just 25 feet away behind a brick wall cut with a gun port, aimed their weapons at Gardner's chest. The Utah law enforcement officers volunteered for the assignment. One rifle was loaded with a blank, so no one knew who fired the fatal shot. A barely audible countdown was interrupted by 2 loud bangs in quick succession. It was 12:15 a.m. The rifles exploded and 4 bullets perforated his heart and lungs. The straps held his head up. A metal tray beneath the chair collected his blood. He clenched his fists and then let go, radio talk show host Doug Fabrizio, one of a small group of witnesses, said, and then he clenched it again. A medical examiner checked Gardner's pulse on both sides of his neck. When the black hood was lifted to check Gardner's pupils with a flashlight, his ashen face was briefly revealed. He was pronounced dead at 12:17 a.m. After a quarter of a century on death row, Gardner, 49, became the first man to die by firing squad in Utah in 14 years. Opponents say firing squads are archaic and barbaric, and about 24 members of Gardner's family, including his brother and his daughter, held a vigil outside the prison. The inmate had asked that none of his family attend his execution. Outside the prison, members of his family, some wearing T-shirts displaying his prisoner number, 14873, gathered to pay their respects. They were joined by dozens of death penalty protesters. Around the time of the execution, family members cranked up a car stereo playing Lynyrd Skynyrd's Freebird. He didn't want nobody to see him get shot, said Gardner's brother Randy Gardner. I would have liked to be there for him. I love him to death. He's my little brother. Shortly after midnight Friday, Shurtleff, the state attorney general, took out his iPhone and opened the Twitbird Twitter application to announce by tweet that he had just gave the go-ahead to corrections director to proceed with Gardner's execution. May God grant him the mercy he denied his victims.
Okay.
So, I do know that, leading up to his execution, there was tons of protest because people really are opposed to the firing squad.
Yeah, which I don't know. I mean, that's not how I would want to go, but it sounds like it's pretty fast. These are marksmen. It goes straight through the heart, straight through the lungs. You don't live long after that. And I think it's cool that there was 5 of them, and they don't ever know who actually kills them.
Well, and it's volunteer basis. And I feel like the inmates get to choose their choice of execution. So I don't think that you have any right to come in and be offended for them when they've chosen this. Yeah, he could have chose lethal injection, but he didn't want to. Yeah, and so totally agree. For me, if that's how he wants to go, then that's his choice. So, like I said, this one wasn't super grotesque or anything, but he had such a crazy life.
Yeah, it was pretty sad childhood. Yeah. It's not really what I was expecting.
No, it's really sad. And you understand why he, and I mean, you really can look and just see all of his escape, all of his murders are just kind of on a whim, just trying to, I mean, the bar one was more I think he just wanted money. But trying to get out of the courthouse was, I really think, just he just wanted to be free, and he knew he wasn't going to be because he'd already been sentenced to life without parole. Yeah. But he just has no regard for anybody else but himself. Yeah. In those moments, so.
That's crazy. That was a good one.
Yeah, it was interesting. I knew
about him, but I didn't know about any of his past.
No, me either.
Literally zero.
And I think for people in Utah, he is known because he was executed by firing squad. Yeah. And so you know the name and you kind of know, but yeah, I had no idea. And obviously, you think you know, but you have no idea. Britney Spears. What was that? I can't remember the name of the show now. It was.
Oh man.
I just remember the one that was Britney Spears. You think you know, but you have no idea.
No idea. Yeah.
Oh, dang it. Anyway, but yeah, it was super interesting. And I mean, it happened in the 80s, which, was when we were born, so. Yeah. Wasn't big enough to be a part of all that, but I remember when he was executed, because that was in the 2000s, so.
Yeah. Well, and I think we got some good laughs out of that one, too.
Yeah,
so.
That was a good one.
That was a good one. Good job.
All right, well, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at
Sinners Among Saints Podcast.
And send us a Gmail at
sinnersamongsaintspodcast@gmail.com. And remember to keep listening if you want in on the sin.
Bye. Peace out. Bye.